The introduction of Act 3 has gone through more iterations than any other chapter intro. I knew what feelings I wanted to convey, but couldn't find the right notes to achieve it. I wanted the player to feel alone, lost and disoriented. At first you would find yourself in a dark office, slowly exploring until you find test chambers. There was a claustrophobic and dark cave to be explored with a flashlight. After a trip to Hallstatt, I was inspired to create an underground mining town. Eventually I combined all the previous ideas into one. Starting at the dark underground beach, at the edge of Aperture, you walk back into the Hornet's Nest, the technological nightmare that is Aperture. We like to imagine Aperture employees come to this beach for a sad makeshift vacation. Here we wanted to add an artificial sun and fake painted sky, but as is always the case in game development, deadlines are approaching and sacrifices have to be made. So all that's left of that vacation paradise are these 2 chairs and some beans. Sorry, employees. The security checkpoint acts as the gate for the portal gun. The idea is that it's a checkpoint for employees and test subjects as they're moving from the 70s era offices to the new. The elevator connects to the hub for newcomers on the top, but all the people who work here have to queue in this little room below. Yes, I say it all the time. I love building connected spaces, and this map is the best example. You go back and forth through these areas and can explore more and more as you turn on the lights and get the portal gun. The elevator right at the end actually overlooks the hub. It was an accident at first, since I just placed an elevator instance and saw that the hub blocked the shaft. I then made the shaft part of the hub, and added windows so you can see where you've been. It's one of my favorite touches of this category in the mod. It took such a long time to find Sarah, but I'm so happy we did. I had no idea who Conley was. I knew what her place in the story was, but her character, man, I had no idea. I auditioned over 60 people, but nothing really inspired me. The classic American or British female voice just felt too simple next to Sterling. I then went on the hunt myself and found Sarah. I didn't know much about Australian accents at the time, and her demo reel also used a lot of other accents, but I just loved her attitude. I invited her to join the project and just begged she would. And she did, and she was more amazing than I could have hoped. Sarah completely transformed this character, and her actual personality also inspired the character of Conley. Of course, Sarah isn't Conley, but her natural lovely attitude allowed me to lean much more into that direction, and it's a great contrast to the grim reality Conley finds herself in. In Portal 2 we see hubs like this for the previous eras of Aperture, but never for modern Aperture, so we wanted to fill that gap. This hub, however, is still under construction and was never completed. It was abandoned before they could finish it. Getting the size right took some back and forth. It was always too cramped at first and then too open later. What we have now feels like a good medium.
Hey, I'm Sarah Jacklin and I'm the voice of our second personality core, Emilia Conley. I'll be providing some behind-the-scenes info on my involvement as a voiceover artist for Portal Revolution. Stefan brought me onto the project quite late in the dev cycle.
Okay, good.
He had heard my reel on castingcall.com and shot me a message which I initially thought was fake. The project just seemed so cool, and it was for a series that I had played as a teenager and was just such a huge fan of. I was quite an inexperienced VO at the time, so it was just phenomenal to be brought on and trusted with this character.
Wait, where are you going? Are we not finishing my part?
The next few maps all have lines like these. The idea behind it was that they were very much meant to be awkward, like the science guys had just grabbed the nearest intern and stuck her in front of a microphone. It's not the job Conley signed up for, and I had fun putting that uncertainty into her voice when she tries her impression of an announcer. Kinda like Sterling at the start of the mod, but worse. For example, it's a very common thing for inexperienced voice actors to put a lot of pauses in their sentences to make it sound like emotion or like the character is thinking, but really, all it does is ruin the flow of the lines, like that. It was tricky trying to find that balance between lines that sound amateur in-universe while also being good to listen to.
When we released the trailer, somebody commented that Sarah sounds like a mom from Bluey. I then started to watch Bluey, and oh my god, how can a show made for kids be this good? I won't rant for too long, but yeah, this is some of the best TV I've ever seen. And it made me love it even more to have Sarah on this project. I just love it. The museum is a recreation of the Portal 2 beta. I know, I just said I recreated beta, but look, I actually shipped it, guys. We wanted to show in a natural way that Cave Johnson is dead and how the company was restructured in his passing. The writing on the walls is corporate whitewashing of the finest caliber. Absolutely dystopian stuff. Yes, I love having my organs be replaced for $60. It's definitely a great way to have a sustainable life. The museum then also presented itself as a great place to give the player the new portal gun. When we made the trailer, people said this mod better have red portals. We didn't actually have that in the mod at the time, but we definitely needed to add it. This third portal gun was the perfect candidate for that. We haven't started to work on a custom portal gun yet, and the non-standard way of obtaining it could explain the new color. The idea is that Aperture started selling portal guns in a bunch of weird finishes when Cave died, in an attempt to repay their debts. This red gun with hazard stripes is some sort of high-performance, dangerous model, but it's not clear if that's just a funny case or an actual warning. You made it through the checkpoint, yay! But is your colleague or family member with you? If not, enjoy the second order waiting room, where you can wait for someone else who is waiting in the previous waiting room. Both waiting together, a wall apart, but together in spirit. Aperture has a very abstract art style, which makes it fun to build weird ideas with some vague shapes. This is supposed to resemble some sort of admission gate to a motel. You can see some windows above. We didn't put that much detail into this area, since it isn't a centerpiece and it would call too much attention to itself if it was too eye-catching. But still, the idea is that all the employees who pass through the checkpoint would now have to check into this sad underground motel. The fully grey color palette is very intentional.
If you've worked in device development, then you'll know
Finding
what
the
this is
voice for
already.
this character was a
But
bit of
if
a
you
journey.
don't, that will
Stefan and I knew
actually
she
give
had
us
to be
better
likable,
data.
and
So
to be likable
just
takes
have
more
fun
than
with
just a
it.
cute voice. She
It
had to
shouldn't
sound
be able to
genuine
hurt you.
and authentic. She had to sound human. Sterling is a very goofy AI, whereas Conley, spoiler alert, is a human consciousness in an orb. I had joined the project with the knowledge that Portal was set somewhere in the Americas with American accented characters and Wheatley. Stefan was a big fan of my natural Australian accent, but I was a little concerned because it's not a sound you hear very often on an international stage, so I wasn't really sure it would fit the universe. But we decided early on to go for it, and it turned out to be the right choice for both me and the fans. I've had so many people be so excited to hear an accent like mine in a game like this, and I think it's brilliant to have that Australian sound be recognised on an international stage. I'm really proud.
This chapter is when I begin to really lean into a more found sound industrial ambient vibe. A lot of the tracks in this chapter feature metallic elements
To
like
remind everybody
dumpsters
who
and metal
didn't read
poles
the
and stuff like
introductory
that.
guidebook about pneumatic diversity vents,
I was largely responsible for creating the background maps for Act 2, Act 3, and Act 4. To make them more interesting than a static background, I added some dynamic stuff to it. I liked the idea that the events for the main menu background took place sometime before the player arrived. In this map, you can see a scorch mark on the ground in a clearly designated turret spot. If you watch Act 3's main menu for a little while, you'll see these turrets get quite talkative and quite bored. So the one to your right winds up shooting a turret that once stood there, causing it to explode
done.
violently.
As a heads
Monster.
up, the following test chambers
This line
may
was
not
recorded
include
very late in the
pre-recorded
game.
messages like
After the
these,
Alconis
in order to
reaction,
measure how
there
test
were
subjects
pre-recorded
behave in
messages
environments
much later in the
lacking
game.
human contact.
We needed to explain
Good luck.
why we didn't hear her pre-recorded messages for what can be an hour of playtime. She explains that it's part of the test, but we think she just got finally promoted due to the work she was actually hired to do.
Okay, while Sterling is away for this act, I just want to take the time to shout out Sarah's performance as Conley. She came in late in the game and just completely brought this character to life. She gave her this wonderful, charming personality when all we had for her was this little bit of backstory. I think Stefan rewrote most of Conley's lines once he realized what Sarah brought to the table. She just absolutely crushed it and made Act 3 such a highlight as you're getting to know her. Sterling, for some reason, used to be in Act 3, and the only thing of value that we lost from that is that at some point, you could throw him into a pit of fire. And I know this because somewhere buried, there are a bunch of unused lines of me screaming in pain. It wasn't even required. Stefan just assumed that given the option, players would want to burn Sterling alive. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is, Sarah's the best.
During a story reread around 2019, I realized that the story is missing some meaningful conflict. At the time, Sterling was the only character who would stay the companion across the whole game. Halfway through the game, the player would fall down into this basement area after the bridge right in front of the spire randomly collapsed. You would then simply climb your way back up with Sterling and try again. After removing the stupid bridge collapse scene, I also decided to add a new character, somebody who would oppose Sterling in some way. It took a long time to develop Conley's character. I didn't want to make another generic personality core, but inventing some custom robot isn't easy either. Humans were out of the question too, as their inclusion would require a lot of story justification and complex character animation. Also, at the time we were still using the standard Portal 2 engine, which has no real support for humanoid NPCs. Eventually I took a character idea from another game idea I had. A game that was purely made out of story concepts and had no real gameplay behind it. In that game, you would play somebody who had their mind scanned and replicated numerous times. In each chapter, you would play a different clone, awoken in a new context with no memories. Goal is to use these isolated experiences to piece together the grander mystery of what happened to you. I knew I wouldn't be able to make this game for at least another 10 years, and since mind scanning fits so well into the Portal universe, I found a way to incorporate this character idea into the game I was already working on.
I still don't like this plan, but here we go.
Conley is a human in a robot ball. This isn't explicitly revealed right off the bat, but we added many hints that she is not a regular core. Her reaction at the beginning is enough for most players, but we wanted to go further and give Conley human character traits. We gave her fears like darkness and heights, and a more bubbly personality than the core guys.
Portal 2 itself, along with many community mappers, even Stefan, would often just put down some desks and chairs and call it a day. However, I always liked giving each desk its own story, a way to see what sort of person worked there. So each of these desks are completely unique and appear nowhere else in the game. Unfortunately, they also happen to be located in the darkest section of the game.
Got it. Woo! The woo is the result of a bug that flung Conley across the room after unplugging. It was always hilarious, and the mappers just took too long to fix it, so during a meeting I just recorded a little woo, and it became a feature. There are a few spontaneous lines like this, like the no hands, only handles line from the office sections a little bit later on, that just came about naturally in response to what we were noticing about the game and the character in development.
Some players felt like she gets over her predicament too quickly. We originally had a more drawn out and tragic introduction, but this made her personality shift seem even more drastic. We didn't want to spend an hour with her depressed core, and a quick recovery helps to reinforce some of Conley's character traits. She's an enthusiastic AI researcher who probably already secretly dreamed of becoming a robot. It's also her experiment, and she later explained that she knew the risks and thus could mentally prepare for it. The real shock for her isn't that she's a robot, but that hundreds of years have passed and all her family, friends and co-workers are now dead. But she doesn't know that yet.
None of this used to be here. How long was I out?